Paul Tran, welcome to the show, man. I'm delighted to get you here.
Thanks for having me, man.
You're like a bit of a social media maven legend online, and I've like seen you on Twitter, and I've been seeing you on LinkedIn, and then you commented on a previous guest that we had, Mike LaRue, from Angry Chicks. You commented on a post he made on LinkedIn, and I was like, "There's our intro to Paul Tran right now. There it is."
Well, please don't call me Maven. I truly just am having as much fun as I can on LinkedIn, and hopefully in the process, just hopefully reaching out to the people I'm trying to serve. Yeah, not too big on the titles and the labels, and you know how people like don't like the name influencer. I just want to serve. I just want to serve the people I want to serve. And totally funny side story. I don't know if Mike told you, but Mike was actually the one that trained me in the franchise industry.
Oh, what, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I joined actually we worked for the same company in 2006, and he was
Whoa.
actually we worked for a company called FranSmart, and they're
Yeah.
like kind of like an incubator for franchising. We take small brands and hopefully turn them into big brands. And when I joined the company, Mike LaRue was actually he was my colleague, but he also was the one that trained me on how to sell franchises and how to attract the right people. So forever grateful for him and love him to death. So yeah, that's a
That
side story.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love that. And I feel like, I've done this podcast, I think maybe like 110 times now. There's something like that. And one thing I've noticed is how small this industry is. Like that. There's a certain cohort of everybody that knows everybody,
Yeah.
and it's become self-referential now. And I'm like so happy about that because the more I do this, the more I'm able to join the dots of all the people in the industry. And it's really cool to know that you go all the way back to 2006. So I guess on the topic of going all the way back, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself? Who you are, and I love the journey. So tell us like how you got to where you are today, Paul.
Yeah. So I've I'll try to give a general picture and you can kind of poke holes at it after. I think that's the fun part. So I've been in the restaurant industry since actually 2005. What got me into the restaurant business was a stupid, reckless idea where I thought that it's an easy starting a restaurant is easy. And I was in college. It was my last semester of college. I was studying business marketing at Long Beach State. And there was a restaurant in my neighborhood. At the time, it was the only restaurant chain that did what it did. Have you heard of the Boiling Crab?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so Boiling Crab was, the biggest and the only restaurant chain in Orange County, California, that was serving crawfish boils, which is where people take Louisiana crawfish, they boil it with a bunch of seasonings and ingredients, and then
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
when you're done, you kind of dump it on the table in front of people, and people just sit there. They break it open, they eat it. It's messy. It's so fun. It's very communal, and at the time, since they were the only game in town, they were met with 2 to 4 hour long waits every single day. And, for me, just being entrepreneurial minded, I just thought to myself, gosh, like I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of people who don't have the time to wait 2 to 4 hours. And there's a bunch of people not willing to wait. So maybe if I opened a restaurant and was all I cared about was just serving the people uh, that were unwilling to wait for 2 to 4 hours. I'm pretty sure there's enough of a market to serve them. And me and a couple of buddies, we just put some money together, mostly our student loan money. That's how you
Nice.
blow it.
YOLO.
And yeah, yeah. Low interest and all that. But we just put together a recipe that we felt good about, and we just opened up our doors, and we made all sorts of mistakes. For example, I didn't even know that crawfish had a season. There's like 2 months out of the year where they don't serve crawfish, and that was the month I decided to open. And I called my suppliers and asked them, like, I'm ready to order crawfish, and they're just laughing at me, and like they're like, you're so stupid, like there's no crawfish right now for 2 months. And it made me realize that Boiling Crab was closed for 2 months out of the year, and I didn't know why. I thought they were just going on vacation, but it was because they didn't have crawfish during season. But anyway, we decided to open, and we decided to use other items like shrimp and crab and a bunch of other like seafood items. And because of that stupid ignorant mistake, whereas I initially wanted to serve just people unwilling to wait 2 to 4 hours, during that 2 to 4 month period, you know how like Chick-fil-A people crave Chick-fil-A on Sundays because they're closed. People were craving boiling crab so much that when they saw us open, 100% of their customers came to us.
Yeah.
And so we were able to capture all of the market and had a great first impression. We were able to convert a bunch of their customers. And that was pretty much what set us on the path to run a successful restaurant for the next 3 years before I got bought out. So, but during that time, we were getting a bunch of franchise requests. I was excited because that sounds like a cool thing. There's McDonald's and Burger King and all those big, large chains. We'd love to be something like that. But I didn't know how to franchise. So that set me on the path to kind of research franchising, the franchise model. And that is actually what landed me to, like how I put product placement landed. I landed on a company called FranSmart. And I initially wanted to ask them to help franchise my concept. But after doing a deep analysis, they said that, I'm not ready. I only have one store. My systems are non-existent or a mess. But during that time, I guess it was like a chance encounter and chance timing, because they apparently liked chatting with me, and they were growing as well. And so they asked like, hey, would you like to, we're growing rapidly. If you'd like to learn the business, would you like to join our company? And so I was running my restaurant and also working for FranSmart at the same time. And that's how I got into the business. I learned how to take small chains, put systems in place, how to sell and attract franchisees. And I did that concurrently until 2008, when an investor approached us and bought me and my partners out of the business. And then I just solely worked for FranSmart for the next 10 years. So I worked for the company for a decade. And during that time, I was fortunate to help companies take, their small mom and pop shops to massive scale. We went international. There's a couple of brands that I ended up helping go public on the stock exchange. Also helped with a couple brands to get acquired, and just all sorts of milestones in between. It was a fun time. But during that time, I had the entrepreneurial itch again, and that was around the same time that one of our clients, the Halal Guys, the famous New York street food brand, decided to become a FranSmart client. And I've always loved the Halal Guys every time I traveled to New York. And so I had a personal connection. And so I took that opportunity to ask my boss, Dan Rowe, if I could kind of double dip again, where I could consult for them, sell franchises, and also be a franchisee. He told me to give it a shot. And so I built a team. I flew out to New York. Before that, I raised the fund to open multiple stores and also show capital availability. And I also flew out to New York to meet the owners, and we hit it off. They felt comfortable with me not only selling franchises, but also being a franchisee too. That's also a huge credibility factor too, right? So I ended up, from 2014 till just last year, we ended up opening a total of 9 stores. We did about anywhere from 15 to 20 million a year in Southern California. And last year, we had a hospitality company approach us and buy us out. So I got exited again, which is a huge blessing. During that time, 2017, I got so busy with my Halal Guys, I ended up leaving FranSmart in 2017. Still have a great relationship with Dan and the team. I still love the company. I ended up just leaving that to focus on the Halal Guys. So during that time, though, a bunch of restaurant chains that I built great relationships with continued to bother me and ask me if hey, you left FranSmart, but we still need help with like growing our franchise. So again, I had this thing about double dipping, man. Man
in demand.
I ended up running my restaurants at the same time, helping a bunch of restaurant chains grow with consulting and strategy, and helping sell some franchises as well. So just always did that. And after I got bought out last year, I was approached by call just came in. I got approached by Troy Hooper, the CEO of Hot Palate, and I guess he was told that I was not a bad franchise developer if you ignore all the memes and all the silly stuff I post on social media. So he asked if I'd be interested in joining the team. I've always loved Pepper Lunch. I first had Pepper Lunch 6 years ago in Australia while I was traveling for business, and I just never forgot that experience. And so same reason as the reason why I jumped into Halal Guys, just loved, had a personal connection with it. So I ended up came out of retirement after selling my company for like 2-3 months. He wouldn't even let me play golf for not even like 2 months, and I ended up joining his company, and here we are.
That's awesome. And I mean, what a great journey. And you know, the way I think about it, so I'm going to sneeze, so I might have to edit this out. It's like my nose is just like tingling.
No, leave it in. Keep it real.
It's like, oh yeah, keep it real. This is raw. This is unedited. I'm like, when I think about that, I mean, like your journey, like is so layered, and I in particular appreciate sort of the entrepreneurial bent that you have, in the sense that, like, you know, going into like a boiling crab type business and not knowing, for example, like the hubris of youth is so fun, you know, in the sense that you're like, we're going to launch one of these restaurants, and then not knowing that there's like a 2-month kind of fishing hiatus for that. And,
yeah,
like, you know, being like effectively the anti Chick-fil-A, like being able to do it on the Sundays, you know, like when there's no one there. I actually saw this week in the news, and I'm not sure if this is real or not, so I don't know if this was like an internet meme, but our Shake Shack launching like free chicken sandwiches on Sundays now or something. I think I saw.
Did they? Oh,
yeah, I think
that's a nice attack.
Either I dreamed that and thus they can take that idea, or I saw that online, and I'm pretty sure I have to say I'm pretty sure I read that. But it's like amazing to think that, like, you know, the hubris of youth is like you just get after it, you know, and it's clearly like your entire makeup is like getting after it. Like it's like you saw opportunity with Halal Guys. I mean, one of the kind of most fabled franchising stories of the last 25 years is probably Halal Guys getting into franchising, you know, like, and just the extraordinary success that business had, you know. And I think it's very cool that, like, you know, you were laughing about your kind of jokey memes, but I think like there's also like a method to that madness, so to speak. You know what I mean? I think like I've had many people on recently talk about content creation, and as a marketer and creating content right now by creating this podcast, I'm a huge believer in content creation. I've had people say to me that they've heard about this podcast to me, and I'm like, sorry, what? You know, like I'm like, wow, okay, it's kind of penetrating on some level. And so I'm a huge believer of it. And you know, I had a great guy on 2 weeks ago from your neck of the woods, and I was saying this to you in our pre-calls, Shawmal Chef and California Barbecue Media, and top bloke, top guy, great thinker about this. And we were talking about like, I'm botching his line
be
now.
The show,
like,
not the commercial.
Be the show, not the commercial, and smartphone storytelling as a sort of like mantra. And I think about that a lot because, you know, you came into my orbit by commenting on Mike LaRue's LinkedIn post about his experience on our podcast. That's how the genesis of this started. And I think about that a lot, as that's such a great lightning rod of like a kind of talking point for this, like for our first topic here, because, you know, like I see such an edge for people in hospitality being on social, like, and really doing it. You have 6,500 followers on Twitter. You've got 13,000 followers on LinkedIn. I mean, extraordinary reach you have. You create incredible content, kind of, you know, you do your social proof of people, like your screenshots, which I adore. I love raw screenshots. You know, you have your funny memes, your GIFs, and all that kind of jazz. That gets in front of people. And you're there doing that, which is amazing. And I mean, like, my question to you, and I think what the audience would love, is like, what's the material impact of you posting on social every day?
I mean, great question. I haven't been able to truly like measure it, nor do I really even want to, because I feel like when you start measuring, you start caring about the metrics too much. If you're a big fan of Seth Godin, Seth Godin, he just posts, he just publishes generously every single day consistently, and he turns off all the measure analytics. He doesn't care. He just cares more that he's adding something of value and bettering people every day. And I like that. It kind of gives me a chance to be lazy and not measure it. but what I found is that creating content is such a powerful tool to, so I mean, as far as material impact, last year I was consulting for a brand that I mean, just by me posting every 2 days consistently about franchising and little case studies that advertising doesn't really cover. For example, the brand I worked with was Roll 'em Up. It's like a taquitos fast casual brand, and they have so many incredible stories that your typical bland corporate advertising doesn't cover. For example, I just posted a case study about how a franchisee was able to take over an old space and open a store for like a fraction of the build-out cost. And they saved this much money and they were open much quicker. Another one was, the story of how a franchisee had no restaurant experience, but they were able to follow the system. They were coachable. They were adaptable in a restaurant space where, you definitely should have experience. This is how a franchisee was able to go against the odds and still make it through. There's all these case studies that your typical advertising doesn't allow. And so I've been able to kind of post to all these different angles. And of course the memes as well. I like to sprinkle the memes just to break up the boring, the super dense stuff on LinkedIn. And I'd like to credit, I've been able to, last year alone, I sold like 50 franchises for Roll 'em Up in a short period of time, mainly because I posted consistently. I tried to share things of value. I kind of cut through the advertising that normally people mentally turn off, and hopefully do it in a very entertaining way. So I'd say that content creation was a huge part of why I was able to sell a bunch of stores and help a brand grow. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just kind of incredible because I think you see lots of people listening will probably be, what they say, the number one worst thing that humans fear is public speaking, number one, and number two is death, and, or something like that,
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot when it comes to content creation. And I'm personally, I have never been much of a tweeter, or I look at Facebook memories and it's like, I cannot believe I said that in 2007 or whatever, the last time I posted on Facebook, you know what I mean? Yeah. And but ever since I started personally doing the podcast, I'm putting myself out there 110 times or whatever the number is now,
That's awesome, by
online.
The way.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fun kind of journey, but it didn't, to your point, it didn't start as a sort of program for measuring material sales for Landed.
Sure.
It started as we can get these people on a podcast. And it was like an opportunity for us to create some interesting content. And we've kind of evolved that into multiple channels and evolved how we approach what is the podcast. I mean, the very first couple of episodes, there was a completely different intro. It was a lot more kind of structured, which didn't really suit my sort of personality. And to your point, you're creating content that's adding value, that you believe adds value in your style. You're mixing sort of case study, data points, kind of interesting things that people in your industry would want, with kind of fun memes that are within the orbit of the industry itself. You're not posting random shit either. You know what I mean? It's like the meme in and of itself is random, but it's it is related to I try to think, it's what's a funny meme? You know what I mean? If you do that Drake meme where he's doing the dap and it's the tree, it's that, we actually printed one of those out for RFDC, I think it was. I can't even remember. Our showstopper. It's let's just print a giant life size of Drake and put him on top of our table. If they won't let us expand the booth, but they didn't say anything about how high we could go, so we printed a 6 foot Drake doing the dap. But yeah, so when I think about social in particular, we see enormous success on the channel. we had a guest yesterday or last week, 2 weeks ago, a lady called Carla Ramirez was on the podcast. She's head of operations at DRG. And she shared in her profile 25 comments and like 60 likes or whatever. And I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, that's like, come at me and tell me that's not adding value to somebody's business. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
yeah, like measure what matters. Like, I'm like just looking at it, observing. I don't need to measure the downstream impact of like whether those people who liked it, engaged it, saw it, exposed to it, become customers of ours today, tomorrow. Like, that's not the point of like the content. It's like being in front of them, that when somebody's ready to buy, that they call me and not somebody else, which is kind of like what's happening with you, you know, which is like you're creating this content, you're like generating and kind of sort of grooming this audience to like your narrative. And when they're ready to buy, when they want to do franchise development, when they want to find a new store, a new location, you're the guy for them, you know, which is amazing. And I think about this a lot because, and you said it really interestingly, that like it's not something you want to measure, which I think is a really powerful statement, whether you think it is or not, because it's like people, especially when they do marketing, especially like departments, especially the people like, they're like, I need to measure this. I need to show like tangible improvement in my metrics. And it's like, no, like it's not always what you need to do. You know what I mean? I find your point of view fascinating there.
I think, advertising budgets need to be measured to a certain degree, but there's also a lot of intangibles as well. I think it's the context matters, right? In the context of me just wanting to, I ultimately just want to be able to help people find the right brand to get into. And there's also just really cool stories that I want to share that matter to me. And so
Yeah,
a lot of times when you have to go in the restrictions of like having to be measured, or is this going to be high ROI? Unfortunately, a lot of incredible stories that are immeasurable, like they don't fit that,
totally.
So I don't want to be bound by that. I mean, I will measure the amount of outreach that I do. I will measure, conversations and how many deals respond to this versus that message. I will measure a lot of things, but as far as just content creation, that should be just like Seth Godin says, that should just be the most generous thing you do, and just do it to help people, and that will be part of your sales process. Not everything should be measured. Not everything can be measured, and that's a fool's errand. And they say that to close a deal, like you need like 20, 30 touches.
Yeah,
content creation is just one of those very important things you just need to do, and whether or not you can measure or not. And I don't want you to delay or make excuses for not being able to create content because you can't measure it. Like that's a total stall, and that's a total cop out. So if you have a story to tell and you want to help better people, you just got to put it out there. That's it. And
totally.
Yeah.
Yes. And you know what's so funny? And it's like bringing it back to Mike and that like LinkedIn post that you commented on that connected us in the first place.
Mhm.
Like Mike will probably be the first to tell you, like he's been dipping his toe into creating this content and is like getting better at it like every day. And it was like funny in our episode, he talked about that and he was like, yeah, like of course I was like, ugh, like first post on like LinkedIn, you give me like you cringe almost, but it's like you get better at it by doing it. And I mean, this advice, us chatting about this, it sounds so easy, doesn't it? Like it sounds like, oh, of course, get out there and write it. But you're like, the devil's in the detail. The way we think about it is like you just have to put the reps in. Like if you want to get shredded for the summer vacation, you better start in January. You know what I mean? Like and it's the same with content. It's just like getting out there and putting the reps in is like what'll get you to the point where you're getting 50, 60, 70, 50 engagements a post when you post on LinkedIn now, even more, who's the audience that's receiving it? It's likely within your audience of people within hospitality, restaurants, franchising, and it's like and you've had dollar impact on that. Like you talked last year about 50, last year, 50 units, franchise units in the last brand you're at. And it's like, how responsible was social for it? It's like, well, you can't really put your finger in it, but like, anecdotally that like a number of those were specifically either directly attributable to those posts or like influenced by those posts, which is incredible. And I mean, you're such a proof point, Paul, for this. Genuinely, like as in, I'm like, whoa, like almost like people should be calling you for social media advice as much as they should be calling you for like, hey, help us with our franchising operation.
Well, yeah, just like the post yesterday, like I don't do a lot of video content, which is where the algorithm favors right now, right? And I don't have like crazy large production budgets, but I will say that most of the deals that I've closed last year, out of the 50 units, I generated equated to an actual revenue of like over $1 million for the brand. So it's super material. But the conversations I have with people when I create content is so cool because now they trust, like you said, they trust me. They actually we have better conversations too.
Yes.
For example, people who reach out to me, they're like, okay, I've been following your content. You talk about this brand so damn much. You are obviously in love with it. Like now we need to talk about why you love it so much. That is the inbound lead that I get. That is cool.
That is awesome.
And another one is content creation gets repurposed. So, every day when I write content, now I can actually send this to prospects. Say, hey, I wrote this thing, instead of your typical just following up, and adding no value whatsoever. Now I'm just like, hey, hey, I just wanted to share this in case, for example, there's a franchisee. I wrote about how restaurants should always do a soft opening before they do a grand opening, and that way, employees don't get burned out. They build confidence, they build muscle memory. You only get a chance to show customers what good looks like once. And I sent that to a couple of my franchise prospects, and they responded back. They're like, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And by the way, that ended up being a 7-unit deal that they loved working with me so much. They ended up expanding it to a 20-unit deal like a few months later. So awesome. I mean, content is, you can't measure that kind of stuff, and it's also evergreen. It's like your sales tool. There's a lot of companies who want to hire salespeople. That's also a great worthy thing because you definitely want focus on generating deals. But before you even do that, like create content, create sales tools for your salespeople. If you don't have the budget for a salesperson, content is your salesperson.
Totally.
Like that is the lead domino, that whether or not you have a salesperson, you actually have something that can get yourself out there. So yeah, I mean, we can talk about this all day long, but content creation is the lead domino.
But totally, I the phrase comes to mind, like great content. It's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
And it's like exactly that. And I think to your point, lead domino is such a great way of phrasing it because like, it's creating those touch points. Like I wholeheartedly agree with you. I mean, I sell B2B SaaS. Like that's what I sell. My buyer is people in HR and operations in hospitality. That's who we sell to. But if I went to every single one of them and said, hey, you got a problem, I got a solution. You're like, all right, mate. Like, yeah, like, sure. And so like the conversation can't be like that. And I think this goes back to this sort of another marketing phrase, like relationship selling. It's like you want a relationship with the seller and you want a relationship with the buyer. You want to align. Like I want to know the problems of like somebody, like, and I want to understand them, like, and I would really want to like communicate that I understand them before I even get to saying, we got a solution for you. You know what I mean? It's like, no, like just really understand the person, where they're coming from, and kind of almost like consultative. Like the relationship is like consultative. Like if people are like hearing your content, they're seeing you, they're DMing you, and they're like, I wholeheartedly agree. And you're not even going in for a sell until it's really ready to even mention that. You know what I mean? It's like engaging in that sort of conversation. And I think that's what people miss when it comes to like social, is like, it is a door opener. It is the first domino, but like, it's all about finesse and how good you are at sales. And it's interesting because we talked about this yesterday, like you're quite an introverted guy, or I would say self-proclaimed. I think anybody listening to this podcast would not call you introverted. I'll tell you that much. Some of them are not that, but as self-proclaimed introverted, but like it is obviously supercharged your ability and your confidence for sales, knowing that you're able to like build a type of pipeline for yourself and have these sort of relationships ready when you're ready and when they're ready.
Yeah. Well, I'm introverted in the fact that if I have to go to a social setting or if I do a speaking event, I'm glad to do it. But if I had a choice, I would rather be prospecting, creating content in the comfort of my own home, being super
Wouldn't we all?
antisocial, and also being in social settings actually drains me. Where I think for you, I think you're an extrovert, right? I think you talking with people energizes you. I think after you and I chat, I need to take a nap. um,
Hey, yeah, I too. I'm gonna go for a walk after this and just go.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
But I think it's a superpower too because introverts tend to be more. I think we'd like to be better listeners rather than talking, and so we're able to listen and gain better insights in order to be more helpful in my response to it. I'd like to believe, and also just because being in social settings drains me, I have to be quite picky with where I deploy my resources and energy to, and also I think that also makes me focus on content creation actually because that way I'm not like that's the opportunity for me to help people at scale without having to be everywhere all the time and draining my resources. So that is the introvert. There's different types of introverts, but that is the type that describes me.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and I mean, I like because it's like when it comes to sales, and like there's room for everyone in sales. It's just like preparing people and training people and kind of, you know, like anybody can sell. Like I don't want to be like that kind of guy that goes, like in Wolf of Wall Street where he goes, sell me this pen, like that kind of intense, intimidating. Or there's that guy on social media now that I don't even want to mention his name. It's all jacked and he just goes around and sells videos. If you're on social media, you've definitely seen this guy.
Which guy? You got to say his
It's
name
like,
now.
I think his name is like Andy Elliott or something. I don't know
Okay.
why I'm getting tons of his content, which is like very infuriating for me, but it's like it's unbelievably intense, like sales, kind of like, why are you not making sales? That kind of boiler room kind of stuff. And it's like I can see why that's intimidating for a lot of people, but like, even at Landed, we've had great success with people that are not necessarily like your sort of prototypical looking salesperson, which is like, I guess somebody sounding like me that's good, you rah rah rah, like chat chat chat. Maybe that's why I'm not in sales. It's like I talk too
No.
much.
Well, you're still
Um,
selling, by the way.
well, I'm selling myself. I'm selling my personal brand. No.
Yes.
But like, you know, it was interesting because your superpower is sales, like you said that, and I find the dynamic between being, able to say that you're introverted. And I know there's like kind of caveats to like why is it like social settings and that kind of thing, but like also saying your superpower is sales is quite interesting. And I think like how do you like kind of balance the two? How do you think about like on one side being superpower sales and the other side being like on a personal level being kind of relatively introverted?
Yeah. I reconcile that by, I mean, introvert doesn't mean like we're antisocial. It just means that for me, it just means that I enjoy one-on-one conversations more. And so that makes me quite effective, like when I'm actually having one-on-one conversations with prospects. And I, I also feel like being an introvert tends to make me feel like a little bit more deeper in the conversation. Uh, I feel like with extroverts, they draw energy from having lots of interactions, and a lot of interactions usually means that you're probably not going as deep. I mean, it's great for getting attention. It's great for moving people into the funnel. But for me, I tend to just be really picky and choosy with who I do talk to. And when I do talk to them, I kind of like empty out. Like I empty out with like insight. I empty out with like personality. I actually ask tough questions that typical salespeople do not. One of my sales strategies is I actually try to talk people out of the deal. Usually I'm just like, hey, like, for example, I'm working with Pepper Lunch, and usually when I'm selling the Pepper Lunch franchise, I'm like, hey, by the way, like Pepper Lunch is a pretty large investment. Like, I mean, it's got incredible potential and you can probably scale this, in a big way, but it's pretty expensive. Like, how do you feel about that? Or like, I actually try to kill the deal because if they
Yeah.
are still around and they still justify themselves, like, okay, this is a pretty qualified prospect. And so, yeah, I think that is the introvert part where that actually becomes a superpower. And so, yeah, I mean, That's one example, I guess.
But you know, and you nailed it there about like, you know, like phrasing it as like how qualified is somebody by pushing them to the edge of how that deal can make or break. You know, I think about that a lot, even on our side. It's like, you know, like how badly does somebody want this? Like, what's their intent? It's so hard to read people like this, especially I think digitally. You know, before you'd have to go into a meeting and sit down with somebody and you could read their body language immediately, whether they were down for the deal or not. Now you're kind of dealing with like digital, and it's like you really have to like and I love your framing of like, you know, I'm kind of there to kind of almost like break the deal as opposed to make the deal, in the sense like, because you can tell where somebody's at by pushing them like in that way. And I think that's like quite a fascinating kind of way of doing it. Do you think like, you know, I think it's interesting because you and I have like distinctly different personalities. And so I'm curious as well, like, you know, when you think about like how your introvertedness kind of, you know, plays into your sales, do you think that helps you with like, it helps make the superpower? Because I don't have like an introverted bone in my body, you know, as people have
I
a
am
lot of
jealous
people
of
know.
you, by the way.
Man, I love being by myself. Like last night, I got a burger, I took it back to the apartment, and I sat there and just put on some music, and I was like, this is relaxing. Taking a break from myself.
That is a perfect day, by the way.
And actually, do you know what's funny? It was actually, I'm here in the East Village in New York, and I opened up Google Maps and I was like, okay, I want to get some food. And there's not that many like chain restaurants around here. They're all kind of one-off kind of restaurant things, whatever.
Sure.
And there was a place called Crispy Burger is what it was called. And I walked over to it. It's on First. They're going to love this, by the way. I mean, if anybody ever wants to go. And I walked in and I was like, oh, this place looks kind of new. And I started chatting to the girl behind the counter. And she's like, oh, this is our soft lunch. On the topic of you talking about soft lunches.
Nice.
And they're doing like Chinese inspired chicken burgers and chicken food. So like, do they, I don't want to say like, do they boil the chicken or? It's like regular
adventurous foods, man.
Totally. And it was actually delicious. And I was chatting with them. She gave me one of their fried cheese things when I was waiting for the food. And they go, yeah, we're doing the soft launch this week. Formal opening on Friday. And I was like, oh, good for you guys. This is awesome. But yeah, that's why I had a relaxing night. My relaxing night is talking to people behind the counter and learning about their businesses. I guess I'm always on.
Yeah, you can't turn off. We can't turn. No such thing as a 9 to 5.
No such thing. But like, it's interesting because I think like you're very publicly out there in terms of like your social persona. Almost like it's almost like a persona. Like you have more like. I don't want to say that in like a negative way, you know what I mean? Like you got social persona, you got your personal life kind of persona, and it's like the fact that you can kind of lean into one to kind of make you comfortable in whichever setting, I think builds into that superpower for your sales. You know, like I think it kind of all kind of ladders up into one, because I mean you've had an extraordinary successful career, so like it must.
Well, I think introvert also requires me. I think it draws a tighter boundary for me too. For example, the reason why I talk people out of sales is also to respect their time, but also to respect my energy as well. Like if I know that they're not going to be a good fit, like I need to flush that out now, or else I'm going to be drained. And it also won't do them any favors either. And I don't want to be delusional with a deal that won't close because they don't meet the requirements or they're not a good fit. And so that allows me to cut it off much sooner, or at least redirect them to someone else who can help better. And so I think that is the part of like, I'm being aware of I think most people get into trouble when they're not aware of their own selves and, know thyself. And so for me, I'm like, okay, if I talk to this person, I need to be really sure that it's going to be a good, fruitful conversation for both parties, because I nobody got time for that.
Nobody got time for that.
Yeah. So that's why, the introversion thing, it forces me to say no a lot more. I'm really picky. I'm very intentional about the conversations that I have. So yeah.
But go on.
No. I mean, that's pretty much.
I was going to say, like, no is a superpower. I think people don't realize that. Like, I tell my team, like, especially like early in people's careers, learning how to push back, learning how to say no, like having the confidence to say no. Like, I am a huge believer in that. Like, it sounds like, I mean, in the sense of like, obviously we want to do work, but I mean, like for my team in particular, like I have a team, they're kids, lol, that's just how old I am. I mean, they're in their early 20s, and like helping them understand that they don't need to say yes to everything in the workplace, for example. You know what I
For
mean?
sure.
That like not every request needs to be urgent. Like, you know, not everything needs to be like immediately accepted as face value. Like you can push back, you can finesse, you can learn more about priorities, you can learn more about like so many things. And I think saying no, like, because I think especially in hospitality, we're in a very people pleasing business. You know, because by the very definition of it, it's the whole
Yeah.
what we're selling is pleasing people. You know, but I think it's interesting as well to hear that. You know, and like how like your kind of your nature as it is as like kind of helped you kind of develop this sort of a real rock star ability for sales. And I mean, there's no doubt, Paul, there is no doubt that like you're in rock star category. I mean, sure. I mean, man, you got the social presence to back it up. You've got the actual revenue to back it up. You know, you're getting headhunted. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you've really made a successful career for yourself. And I mean, this has been 41 minutes that of a podcast that has flown by.
That
Like,
is
I am
crazy.
like, do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's so fascinating to hear you talk like this. And I would say you might not agree, but I'll find out the stat afterwards because AI is amazing. Lol. But like, I think I've probably spoken for about 20% of this call. And you've really kind of delivered for me, man. And I really appreciate you coming on the pod to like have this chat with me. Like, it has been a phenomenally informative chat. And I really hope people listening really take away something from this. Like, this is one of my favorite episodes, I guess, because we're chatting about marketing, which is obviously a passion of mine too.
Sure.
But like, it's been an absolute pleasure to learn about you, Paul, and I appreciate you coming on the pod so much.
Oh, like the pleasure's mine, man. Like, yeah, the time flew by really fast. And it's funny because there's so many other topics that we can get into. And I feel like we barely scratched the surface on content creation and actionable stuff, right? So I don't know. We got to extend this for part two.
Well, we might, the part two, you know, as they say. What's the new Joker film? Folie à deux, you know, isn't that what
Oh
they
my
call the new one?
gosh. Joaquin Phoenix did such an incredible job. It broke that movie broke my heart, by the way. Like, my gosh, it's so good.
Oh yeah, it did a number. It did a number on me too, I have to say. Well, Paul, thanks so much for coming on. Don't hang up. I really appreciate it. And yeah, man, you know, you do you, man. Happy to have you here.
Oh, my pleasure, man. And keep building as well. And I'm glad you and I both agree on creating content to serve other people and cast more value than we capture. And that's just a sustainable business model. So keep it up as well. Let's inspire each other.
You're a legend. Thanks, man.
Thank you, man.